Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. Now, we're planning on jumping back live into the Kale Shower courtroom in a little bit. Father accused of gunning down his son. Also, it should be noted that at 2 p.m., we have a special on the upcoming Robert Durst trial, so you don't want to miss that. Right now, though, as we've been reporting this past week, a jury convicted Harvey Weinstein of 2 sexual assault crimes, and he is set to be sentenced on March 11th, facing 5 to 29 years in prison. Now, while the Weinstein saga today is front and center, that wasn't always the case. Our next guest was a former producer at NBC News who worked alongside journalist Ronan Farrow to expose Weinstein, but claims his former employer deliberately tried to kill the reporting. Rich McHugh penned an incredible story for Vanity Fair, and I encourage everybody to read it. And it details this purported cover-up, and he joins us now. Rich, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So what made you want to come forward with this explosive piece on Vanity Fair? In Vanity Fair?
You know, being in the middle of this maelstrom and reporting it from the very beginning when Ronan and I started in the end of 2016 or early 2017, we had no idea what kind of a hornet's nest we were getting into. And so once we were in it, and we realized that we had the story reportable after interviewing Rose and others, and then to be told no, you know, once we had amassed all this evidence, it just didn't sit well with either of us, and I knew it was wrong. And I knew after being in the news business for 20 odd years, I was like, this is wrong. And I know I can't live with myself if I just kind of be quiet about this. And so I decided in that moment that I can't stay here. My contract, I was still under contract, but I can't stay here, and I have to say something at some point in my own way that I'm comfortable with. But if I'm silent, if I stay silent about this, I'm gonna remain complicit.
When did you know first that something was off here, that your reporting was hitting a wall?
Pretty early on. We interviewed Rose McGowan right off the bat, and she went on the record with us and said what she had been telling people in Hollywood for years, that Weinstein had raped her. Soon after that, we decided not to air that around the Oscars. We vetted it with lawyers, and the mandate was to get more reporting. And as the spring wore on, we wanted to work on this, and we were told to, you know, you guys have a lot going on, you know, put this story on the back burner. And Ronan and I both found that very odd. I was like, we have this interview that is explosive, that can rip this story right open, and yet we're being told to put it on the back burner. It seemed of the wrong spirit. It wasn't journalistically, you know, I couldn't understand in any journalism entity why you'd ever stop at that point. And so I was like, something's not right here.
And when I read the piece, I was seeing 2 ways this was happening. One, it felt like Weinstein was behind all this, and he had something against NBC. He had something on a top official at NBC, and I was hoping you could speak a little bit more about this. And it also seemed that he was directing the top brass here, Noah Oppenheim and Andy Lack. So what was going on? What was Weinstein's role at trying to, or alleged role here at trying to influence what NBC was reporting?
We've learned that very early on, Weinstein was aware of the fact that we were trying to report this. And we know soon after the Rose McGowan interview in February of 2017, he was aware of us, and he had employed Black Cube to look into Rose. But when we met with Rose and did the interview, I think he was aware of us. And so daily emails would go from Black Cube associates to Harvey saying, this is what McHugh and Farrow are working on, et cetera, and another firm. In the spring, he tried to reach out, not to me, but through an intermediary that I knew, but to Ronan directly. And so we were kind of like, okay, he's aware, really aware of what we're working on, and we didn't engage at that point. But it was like, we knew at that point, okay, if we don't engage with him directly, he's going to go above us, and he's just going to go to some honcho. You know, I think it's in the Catch and Kill podcast. So he's going to go to someone above us and try and kill this from above without ever talking to us. And ultimately, that's, you know, from the records that have now been published, conversations had, you know, over a dozen, I believe, conversations with executives at NBC. and NBC executives confirmed to his lawyer in the middle of the summer, as has been reported, that they were no longer working on a story on Harvey Weinstein. So,
well, what do you make of the argument that, hey, and this came out in trial, he had investigative firms like Black Cube and all this because he was afraid of being extorted, that he wasn't trying to quiet these stories. It was just not true. It was not true what was being said about him. He was trying to fight back, and that, that's what happened. He was being extorted by these women. You heard some of this during the trial. And Black Cube, these kinds of agencies came up constantly during the course of testimony. Your thoughts on that argument?
I challenge anybody who has that argument to read one of the pieces I wrote for Vanity Fair where I interviewed 30 of his victims. You can't possibly read that and believe that claim because these women, to a T, none of them wanted to be in this situation. And they've gone through incredible trauma in the decades following. And so for him to say, these were specious claims or whatever, it speaks to a guy who's been able to operate with impunity for decades and hasn't really had to be accountable to anything. And I think we're just seeing the levels of concentric circles that protected this guy for decades. And I think that's potentially the next focus.
What's been the response to you coming out and speaking about this? I mean, have those top officials at NBC, they're still there? Have they responded to your piece? Have you seen any blowback personally from this? I know you mentioned, and it was one of the most shocking things from the article, that when this was all going down, you had your phone hacked, your residence broken into. Have you seen, and it was all in relation to Harvey Weinstein with these investigative firms. Have you seen anything, this kind of negative blowback since you came forward with the Vanity Fair piece?
Nothing. In fact, what I found most curious was that they didn't even respond to my piece.
Who's that?
NBC. They included one line. I think my article was, I don't even know how many thousands of words it was, 6,000 or 8,000 words. It was long, and it was different than Ronan's book. And they included one line about my article in a 12-page defense of Ronan's book, Catch and Kill. And so I think I think that says a lot when they don't even respond, and I don't think they want people to read it. I don't think they want it out there. I don't think they want any of this. They just want it to go away. During the process, we documented where they said, like, if people stop talking about this, this will go away. And it's like, well, we're journalists. You're assuming that we want this to go away. So, I'm not sure.
What is Ronan's?
Personally, I have not met a journalist who has said, I disagree with your article, or I think you're wrong. Like, every single person I've talked to has been like, that article was incredible. That was a public service, especially from employees at NBC. Were like, thank you. You said a lot of what we could not say.
Employees or anchors or
both.
So they were seeing this, they were watching this go on, everything, that you were the voice and the ears and eyes.
Rachel Maddow went on TV in October and confirmed what we were saying. She said, I have independently confirmed inside NBC that they were told to pause the reporting, which is a euphemism for stop.
I guess the question is why? I mean, when I read your piece, it seems like Weinstein had leverage against NBC because of Matt Lauer. Is that what you think was going on here?
I do. 100%. I think that's how he played. He found an Achilles heel in any time a reporter was coming up with a story, and there are dozens of these stories. Ken Auletta and other Ben Wallace, writers who had the goods, so to speak, or almost had the goods. The focus for Weinstein in his attack was always was an individual attack. And because that was the most leverage he could have, and so that's why he was employing these firms. Like the contract stated, like you are employed to derail this reporting.
That's
and
shocking.
To do that, you have to either impugn reporters or the reporting itself or the victims who've come forward. Like you have to discredit Rose McGowan somehow.
And speaking of that, discrediting the accusers, there's been a lot of different figures in this. Lisa Bloom is somebody who used to represent Harvey Weinstein. She's a renowned women's rights advocate. She has since come forward and seems to have regret that decision to represent him. A memo came out showing her with Harvey Weinstein, advising him how they would discredit these victims. I want to show you something right now. This is actually a quick clip of her, and then I want to get your perspective on this. So again, this is Lisa Bloom.
So I have said many times that in the past I did occasionally represent accused people. I no longer do that. After I withdrew from the Weinstein matter when the first woman went on the record and accused him of sexual assault. And I hope that justice is done in that trial.
So she basically said she hopes justice is done. She said she used to represent Harvey Weinstein and she's moved on. Now, my understanding is she had an interesting relationship with you and Ronan at this time because she was representing Harvey Weinstein. So can you speak about this, what her role might have been in this, if you can?
I mean, it was clear as day what, at a certain point, what her role is in, it's documented. She admitted, to Ronan directly. She said, when we were trying to figure out her allegiance, about who was his people, and Ronan confronted her, and she said, "Ronan, I am his people." So, she made a calculated decision, and the New York Times reporters have documented this too. It's like she had long been working on behalf of victims, and then went to the dark side and represented Harvey Weinstein, and that's just, in my opinion, that's unforgivable with what she does, and I think she's trying to rewrite history.
We had her on a program right as she announced she was going to be representing him, and that was an explosive interview, to say the least. I want to go into, I saw you the day of the verdict,
right.
And I didn't realize who you were at the time, and I had an opportunity then to read everything that went down, but you were there the day of the verdict.
Yep.
What did you think?
Personally, it was just, I think the word that comes to mind is gratifying. This is about, having worked on this for 3 years and having talked to so many women who've, suffered at the hands of this guy. It's rewarding because I know how much it meant for them. And they were on pins and needles for weeks prior to this, and couldn't sleep. And if he had been acquitted, it would have been a serious blow to a lot of what they've been coming forward with for the past couple of years. And so part of my happiness is, it's as a reporter, you try and remain objective at all costs. But when, this story has become personal for me because it's, my life has been upended, and I see how their lives have been upended. And so it was a very, very gratifying moment to see him, when the guilty verdict came down and he was remanded into custody. It was like, this is the power of journalism and women coming forward.
And you talk about it being personal. We saw throughout the course of this trial that Harvey Weinstein's defense attorneys, it was their job to cross-examine these accusers. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it got ugly and sometimes it got tough. Your thoughts on their tactics? Because what they basically had to do was call these women liars, mm-hmm. or they're mistaken about what happened. Your thoughts on that?
Look, I think it was the only thing that they could do, the only strategy that they could employ, because, I feel that the evidence was stacked against them. These crimes have been notoriously hard to prosecute, but I think they picked a strategy that was in line with what they thought they could defend in court, and they stuck to a strategy. They might actually believe it. I've met both Donna, and I have great respect for Damon Sharonis. They're good attorneys, but if you're representing somebody like Harvey, you have to throw everything you can at this. And so, what Donna has said, and here, I just don't want to get into it, but right. It's, I think at the end of the day, they tried their best. They put their best foot forward, and the prosecution did as well. And 12 jurors ultimately heard everything. So now it's not even up to us. The jurors heard it. They came back with a verdict, and that's the important thing.
I know we have to let you go. I want to ask you one final question. With Noah Oppenheim still there, Andy Lack still there, high-level positions, do you feel that there's still a level of protection going on, maybe of them, but also maybe in other networks where there's still protection going on to shield stories from coming out? I mean, what your account was absolutely incredible. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It felt like a movie that is horrifying. Do you think there's still protection happening at these upper levels that we don't know about yet?
I can't speak to other networks, but I think so with regard to NBC. Otherwise, there would have been a house cleaning. You know, I know many of the employees there believe it's a disgrace, and are just working because they want their jobs. We love what we do as journalists, and so that was the hardest part for me leaving, because I was like, I actually loved working at NBC. But I think there is protection from above. I think this goes all the way to the top, and that's why we haven't seen change there. And it's a problem, you know. I think for the future, if we can figure out some way with networks and insensitive reporting like this, if we can create a firewall of sorts or a protected zone where sensitive stories can't be subjected to corporate interests, like that's important, and that's a way forward. But I don't see it really happening. I mean, there are places that are on network news that are doing phenomenal journalism still, and hopefully that continues. But you're seeing a shift with really sensitive stories going away from places like NBC. Like they're going to, you know, Surviving R. Kelly, and they're doing it outside where it's like it's journalism happening, but it's not on the traditional broadcast. So I don't have the answers, but there's a change needed for sure.
Well, you definitely shed some light that a lot of people are reading into. Again, I encourage everybody to read your piece. Rich McHugh, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Wishing you the best of luck, and hopefully I'll see you on March 11th during the sentencing.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back.